I woke up that morning expecting very little, which is probably the saddest part. No grand gestures, no surprise party, not even a gift. I knew better than to hope for those things. But I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would remember. A card, a hug, a happy birthday over coffee. Something that would say, you matter, even just a little. That wasn't too much to expect from your own family, was it? The sun had barely stretched into the sky when I sat up in bed. The house was already moving without me. I could hear movement in the kitchen, clinks of glass, the low hum of voices, laughter. It was a familiar sound, but it didn't feel like it belonged to me. Not that morning. I pulled on my shirt, padded quietly down the hall, and stepped into the kitchen. Mira was already dressed, hair done, makeup light but polished, that familiar vanilla perfume floating around her like a soft warning. She stood near the island counter packing snacks into a cooler, protein bars, fruit slices, bottled water. "Morning," I said, my voice scratchy from sleep. She looked up briefly, then back down at the bags. "Morning. Coffee's fresh." No kiss. No smile. Not even a glance that held weight. I walked to the coffee maker in silence, poured a cup, and leaned against the sink. That's when I noticed the fishing rods lined up by the door. Coolers packed. Foldable chairs stacked like puzzle pieces. A bag of ice melting slowly in a bucket on the floor. Zara appeared from around the corner, brushing her thick curls into a ponytail. She didn't even see me at first. "Zara," I said. She paused, startled. "You're up early." "Oh, hey, Dad." "Yeah, Uncle Aaron's picking us up." "He's already on the way," she said quickly. "I need to find my hat." She disappeared again, and I stood there, coffee in hand, feeling like a stranger in my own house. Something in my chest tightened. I turned to Mira, trying to sound casual. "Fishing trips today?" She didn't even pause what she was doing. "Yeah, you know how Aaron is. Won't wait for anyone. We've been planning it for weeks." I nodded slowly. "Today's also my birthday." It came out calmly. No accusation, no expectation. Just a reminder, a statement of fact that shouldn't have been necessary. Mira stopped for half a second, looked at me with mild surprise, and then went right back to zipping up the cooler. "Oh, right. Happy birthday." She said it like a passing comment, like saying nice weather today. Then she added, "We'll celebrate later this week or something. Maybe order in." I wanted to ask why. Why it had to wait. Why my birthday was treated like an inconvenience they forgot to cancel. But I didn't ask. I didn't even flinch. I just sipped my coffee and let the bitterness settle on my tongue. Zara came bounding down the stairs again, pulling on her hoodie. "Uncle Aaron's here," she shouted, grabbing a bag and rushing toward the door. Mira followed behind her, pausing just long enough to lean in and kiss my cheek. Light, distant, like a favor to an acquaintance. "Don't wait up," she said with a half-smile. And then the door opened. Cool air drifted in. I watched my wife and daughter climb into the truck, laughing as Aaron honked the horn and shouted something about the best fishing spot being 2 hours away. Mira waved lazily through the window. Zara didn't look back at all. Then the door closed. Just like that. The house fell into a silence so heavy, I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. I stood there, still holding my coffee, staring at the spot where their shoes used to be, now empty. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't sad either, not the kind of sadness that breaks things. It was quieter than that. Numb. Familiar. I walked to the living room and sat in my usual chair. The same chair I sat in when Zara took her first steps. The one I fell asleep in when Mira was in labor. The one I repaired last fall after the leg cracked. I sat there and waited for the emotions to catch up to me, but they didn't come the way they used to. I looked at my phone. No messages. No calls. No reminders set on anyone's calendar, clearly. I took a sip of my coffee, now lukewarm, and let my eyes settle on the framed photos on the shelf. One from Zara's 12th birthday, her smiling with cake smeared on her face, Mira hugging her from behind, me in the background holding up a sparkler. Another photo from our anniversary trip years ago, when we could still hold hands without tension. All those captured smiles, they didn't feel like memories. They felt like someone else's life. I wasn't expecting a parade. I didn't need streamers or balloons. But what I did need, what I had quietly hoped for, was to matter. Just for a day. One day a year. Instead, I was left with an empty chair, a cup of coffee, and the realization that the people I loved most had chosen someone else's plans over celebrating mine. I stared out the window, watching a single bird land on the porch railing. It hopped twice and flew off again. That morning I had woken up hoping for something small. But now, what I had was even smaller than that. less than small. It was invisible, forgotten, and it wasn't the kind of thing I could ask to be fixed. Because asking to be remembered, that's not something you should have to do. So I didn't call. I didn't send a reminder text. I didn't beg for attention or cry in the bedroom. I sat in my chair, feeling the shape of the absence they left behind, and made a quiet promise to myself. If they didn't want to remember me, then fine. But I'd make damn sure they never forgot what they missed. I didn't move much that day. After the door closed behind them, I just sat there, letting time pass like rain on a windshield. You don't stop it. You don't chase it. You just watch it fall. The clock ticked, the coffee cooled, and I stayed in that same chair long enough for the shadows in the room to shift from morning light to the gray tint of late afternoon. But I wasn't stuck. No, not this time. Something inside me had begun to shift, not out of anger, not even out of sadness, but from a quiet, steady realization. I'm done begging to be seen. I had spent too many years giving, showing up, helping, fixing, covering, forgiving. I wasn't keeping score, but still, deep down, you expect something back. You hope that if you love consistently, they'll love you just as steadily in return. But love that has to be reminded to show up isn't love. It's convenience. And on my birthday, I learned exactly where I ranked in their lives, somewhere beneath bait, fishing rods, and my brother's weekend plans. I walked outside and sat on the back porch with a second cup of coffee, this time intentionally letting it go cold. The wind rustled through the old oak tree, shaking a few early brown leaves loose. Fall was coming. A quiet season. A season that matched what I felt, bare, reflective, and ready for change. Across the yard, the neighbor's boy was throwing a tennis ball to their dog. He waved at me. I waved back. It hit me then. I had never once been too busy for a moment like that. Not for my daughter, not for my wife. I was the kind of man who stopped mid-project to help with homework, who paused late-night work to talk about dreams or fix a broken charger or drive across town because someone forgot their textbook. I'd made myself available for everyone, except myself. And now, I was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind of tired that sits in your bones. That whispers no more. That nudges you to do something different, something bold. But bold didn't mean loud. I wasn't going to scream or slam doors. No, that's not my way. I was going to do something more effective. I was going to show them. I stood up slowly, joints popping from the long sit, and went back inside. The house was still quiet. Their absence clung to the walls like dust you can't see until sunlight hits it just right. I glanced at the fridge where old magnets held up expired coupons and a chore list no one followed anymore. In the middle of it all was a photo from 3 years ago, Zara's 16th birthday party. She had wanted a 90s theme. I built a mini dance floor in the garage, strung up colored lights, even borrowed an old boombox from a coworker. Mira laughed that night, genuinely. Zara said it was the coolest party ever. They used to celebrate. But somewhere along the way, I'd become the one-man support team. No cake. No decorations. Not even a dinner reservation. Not anymore. I opened a drawer, pulled out a yellow notepad, and wrote 3 simple words. It stops here. Not the marriage, not the relationship with my daughter, but the invisible version of me. The version that only existed when there was something to fix, money to be sent, chores to be done. That version was gone. Later that evening, when the house still remained empty, I ordered takeout, just for me. Thai noodles and mango sticky rice, because I like them. No one ever wanted it when I suggested it, but that night wasn't about anyone else. I sat at the table alone and didn't feel sorry for myself. I felt clear. There's power in silence when you stop resisting it. It becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, I saw a man who had been worn thin, not from neglect, but from loving people who had forgotten how to love him back. I wasn't going to lecture them. I wasn't going to make speeches or send dramatic texts. I'd done the emotional labor of keeping this family warm. Now, they could learn what the cold felt like. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than I needed to. Made coffee again, but this time, I sat with a pen and started thinking. Not sulking planning. What if I celebrated myself? What if, instead of waiting for them to come around, I did something for me? Something simple. Something bold. I thought about who in my life had truly shown up for me, not out of obligation, but with heart. A name came to mind. Harold. My older cousin. He was once a chef before retiring to the countryside. We hadn't spoken in a while, but he always remembered my birthday, except maybe this one. I picked up the phone and called him. Jules. His voice boomed like it always had. You still breathing, man? Breathing, but a little lighter than I was yesterday. He chuckled. You sound like you just hit some kind of truth. Something like that, I said. Listen, I want to throw something small this weekend. Not a party. Just something that reminds me I still exist. Would you come? There was no pause. Say when and what to bring. I'll cook. That was the first domino. Next, I called Nia. She was a local musician, half soul, half jazz, all heart. Years ago, she was struggling to pay tuition at the community college. I'd met her at a coffee shop and ended up covering one of her semesters after hearing her play guitar for tips. We'd kept in touch. Not closely, but enough. When I asked if she'd be willing to play a few songs in the backyard, she said, for you. I'll bring the whole damn band. Then Corey. He was 15 when I met him. A neighborhood kid with no father figure. I gave him odd jobs, taught him to change a tire, balance a checkbook. He once said, "You're the reason I didn't give up." Now he had a wife and a baby of his own. When I called, he didn't even let me finish. Tell me what to wear, he said. We'll be there. That day felt different. My feet were light. My chest didn't carry the same weight. I didn't need a crowd. I just needed truth. I needed presence. And this time, I was choosing who I let into my space. No more fishing trips where I'm the forgotten name. No more watching my daughter celebrate everyone but me. No more pretending. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. By the time Mira and Zara got back that evening, I had already printed a simple invitation and slid it under the fridge magnet. This Sunday. Backyard. Food, music, laughter. Bring only love. Mira glanced at it, read it, and smiled faintly. Oh, whose event is that? I looked her in the eyes for the first time in days. Mine. Then I walked away. The house felt oddly cooperative that week. Mira didn't question the invitation on the fridge. Zara barely looked in my direction. I wasn't surprised. It had always been like this. The moment I stopped talking, they stopped noticing. That used to bother me. Used to dig somewhere deep in my ribs and settle like a dull ache. But now? Now I felt something else entirely. Focus. Control. I had been invisible in this house for so long that when I finally started making quiet plans, no one even blinked. And that was perfect. I wasn't planning a spectacle. I wasn't trying to prove a point. This wasn't about fireworks and revenge. This was about presence. Reclaiming it. For once, doing something just for me without waiting for permission, without checking if it fit into anyone else's schedule. I was done living like a placeholder. Tuesday morning, after they left, Mira to her job at the architecture firm, Zara to her final year of high school, I cleared the living room, pushed the couch to the side, rolled up the rug, and dusted off the boxes I hadn't touched since I thought dreams were still allowed. In the back of the hall closet, I found the old camera gear, tripod, lenses, a Canon I hadn't touched since Zara was 12. I used to take pictures for fun. Portraits, landscapes, little moments that felt like they deserved to live forever. But somewhere in the shuffle of bills, breakdowns, and busy lives, that part of me got shelved. Not this time. I tested the battery. Still charged. I plugged in the SD card, pointed it toward the open backyard door, and hit record. I wanted this Sunday to be more than a gathering. I wanted it to live on in color, and sound, and memory. I was tired of the important things in my life disappearing without proof they ever mattered. Next came the phone calls. I called Harold again, this time to ask if he could bring his signature jerk chicken and maybe, if he wasn't too busy, the potato salad that had ruined family cookouts for every other aunt and uncle. He laughed. I'll bring both. Might even wear that ridiculous chef's hat, too. I smiled. Do that. It always made you look 10 pounds wiser. He chuckled. Jules, I haven't cooked for a man who actually deserves it in years. You better wear something nice. Then Nia. Acoustic or full amp? She asked when I told her about the backyard. Just the guitar, I said. Keep it soft. Keep it simple. You sure? I got a drummer who owes me a favor. I paused. Bring him. Let's make some noise after all. The last call I made that day was to Corey. Bring the baby? He asked. Only if she's in the mood to smile. She always is. There was something comforting about those 3 calls. Not just because they said yes, but because none of them asked why. They didn't need to. These were the kind of people who had watched me go quiet over the years. They'd noticed when I started fading out of my own celebrations. Maybe they didn't say anything then, but they were saying something now. Loud and clear. By Thursday, I had borrowed a few folding chairs from the community center and dug out the old string lights from the garage. I cleaned the grill, swept the back deck, and trimmed the wild edges of the lawn with a kind of energy I hadn't felt in years. I didn't tell Mira a thing. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't know her the details. If she noticed me dragging chairs and scrubbing the patio, she didn't say a word. If she heard me humming while I tested the speaker system, she didn't ask what was coming. Maybe she didn't care. Or maybe, deep down, she assumed it had nothing to do with her. I didn't correct her. Friday night, Zara asked if she could borrow my car on Sunday. I looked at her calmly. Not Sunday. She furrowed her brow. Why not? Because I'm hosting something that day, I replied. Oh, she said. Is it, like a barbecue? Something like that. She paused. Should I tell Mom? If you want. She nodded but didn't ask to join. And I didn't invite her. Not out of pettiness, but because real invitations are built on presence. If you haven't been present, you don't get a front row seat. Saturday, I stayed quiet again. Focused. I tested the camera angles. Practiced with the lighting. Harold texted to say he'd be bringing a few friends who remembered me from back in the day. People who asked about you, he wrote. That meant more than I could explain. Nia confirmed her time slot. Corey sent a photo of the baby smiling in a pink sun hat with the message, ready for showtime. I don't remember the last time I smiled that hard reading a text. By sundown, I had printed a simple chalkboard sign for the yard. Today is a good day. No hashtags. No balloons. Just truth. As I stood in the backyard, watching the final colors of sunset drip over the fence line, I took a long breath. A still one. I realized something. This wasn't just a gathering. This was the first time in years I had built something with no audience in mind except myself. Not to impress Mira. Not to win Zara over. Just me. I thought about all the birthdays I had celebrated for them. The scavenger hunts, the handmade cards, the surprise trips, the emergency cake runs at 10 p.m. because chocolate frosting was a must. I thought about the years I gave and never kept track until now. Until I saw the return on investment. And it was silence. This Sunday, I wasn't looking for payback. I was reclaiming the kind of joy that didn't need witnesses to feel real. That night, while Mira watched a movie in the bedroom and Zara scrolled through her phone in the living room, I stepped outside to the porch again. Just me and the lights I'd hung. The faint buzz of summer's end in the air. I imagined the sound of laughter, the clink of glasses, the soft strum of guitar. I smiled to myself. They had chosen to leave me behind on the day I was born. And that told me everything I needed to know about how small I had allowed myself to become in their world. But come Sunday, I wasn't going to be small anymore. I was going to remind myself, quietly, gently, fully, that I was never the problem. I had just been too patient with the wrong kind of silence. Sunday arrived with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. The kind that wraps around your morning and whispers, today will be different. I woke up early, earlier than usual, and not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was no panic, no list of errands, no one rushing me out of the way to get to their plans. Just me, the open space of the backyard, and the promise of something real. I stepped outside barefoot, the grass still wet with dew. The string lights I'd hung 2 days earlier were gently swaying in the breeze. The chairs were already arranged in a half-moon under the oak tree, and the grill stood cleaned and ready, like it knew its moment had come. Everything was quiet, but not empty. It was the kind of quiet that holds its breath before the joy arrives. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard as the sun broke through the horizon. That morning, Mira didn't ask what I was doing. She barely looked up from her phone. Zara was still in bed. I didn't bother them. This wasn't their story today. Around 11, Harold's old pickup truck pulled into the driveway. He got out wearing a red apron, a wide straw hat, and a grin that could break tension in any room. You ready, birthday boy? He called out as he slammed the tailgate. I walked outside with a smile and hugged him tight. I've been ready for years. He popped open the back of his truck and started unloading trays of seasoned meat, tubs of homemade salad, and a cooler that had to weigh more than both of us combined. I brought extra. You never know when good food attracts a few extra folks. Soon after, Nia arrived in a rusted blue hatchback, carrying her guitar in one hand and a speaker in the other. She wore a denim jacket covered in patches and a beaming smile. Tell me where to plug in, she said. And tell me who needs to cry first, 'cause I got some songs that'll break hearts in all the best ways. We laughed as she sat up beneath the oak tree. She tuned her strings, tested her mic, and started softly playing while Harold lit the grill. The scent of jerk chicken started curling through the air like a warm invitation. Then Corey showed up, his wife in a sundress, their baby wrapped snug against her chest. He looked around the yard with a slow, thoughtful smile. "Man," he said, shaking my hand. "This feels good. It feels like something." I nodded. "It is." Within the hour, more people showed up, faces from different parts of my life. A coworker I hadn't seen in a decade. A neighbor who once called me, the guy who helps everyone and asks nothing. Even my barber, Dean, came by with his teenage son and a bottle of apple cider. Every one of them brought something: food, drinks, old stories. But more than that, they brought presents. And that's what made it beautiful. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. There were no bouncing castles or Instagram backdrops or themed napkins. Just conversation, connection, and warmth. Music filled the background as laughter rose in pockets across the yard. People passed plates. Children played with bubbles. Someone's toddler tried to hug my leg and then waddled away. Harold handed me a paper plate stacked with food and said, "You know what this is? This is love made visible." He was right, because for the first time in what felt like forever, I was surrounded by people who weren't there for obligation or status or appearances. They were there because they wanted to be. At some point in the afternoon, Nia stood in the center of the yard with her guitar and said, "I'm dedicating this one to Jules, the man who doesn't just give quietly, but listens loud." She played an old Sam Cooke song, "A Change Is Gonna Come." The moment her voice hit that first note, I closed my eyes. I let the sun kiss my face, and I felt something shift inside me. Not sadness, not nostalgia, peace. For those 3 minutes, I wasn't a forgotten husband. I wasn't an ignored father. I wasn't a man waiting to be acknowledged. I was just alive. After the song, Corey raised a toast with a red plastic cup. To Jules, the man who never missed a moment, even when people stopped noticing. Everyone raised their cups and echoed, "To Jules." I blinked quickly to clear the tears threatening to fall. But I didn't hide them. I let them sit there, proof that I was still capable of being moved, still capable of feeling. Throughout the day, I moved slowly, intentionally. I checked on everyone. I laughed. I took photos. I captured hugs, danced steps, and even the baby's quiet nap under the tree. The camera clicked steadily, as if it, too, wanted to remember what real joy looked like. Later in the afternoon, I noticed something. Myra's car was gone. Zara wasn't home either. I hadn't heard a word from either of them all day. Not a message. Not a call. Not even a look from the window. Maybe they didn't want to be around all this. Maybe they were too busy. Or maybe, just maybe, they thought I wouldn't go through with it. But I had. And that made all the difference. Because this day wasn't about who didn't show up. It was about who did. As dusk settled in, people began to leave, one by one. Each goodbye came with a hug, a thank you, a "don't wait so long next time." They left behind plates scraped clean, footprints in the grass, and memories that refused to fade. Nia packed up her guitar and kissed my cheek. "Next year, same time?" I nodded. "Every year from now on." Harold slapped my back. "You ever forget who you are, you call me. I'll remind you." Corey lingered last. He looked around at the now quiet yard and said, "You're not alone, Jules. You never were. But sometimes we all need a day like this to remember." After they left, I stood alone in the backyard, looking up at the sky. The string lights buzzed gently above me. The grill was cold. The chairs were empty, but my heart wasn't. And as I turned to go inside, I glanced at the camera one last time. The red light was still blinking, recording every second of a day my wife and daughter had chosen to miss. A day filled with real laughter, real love, real presence. A day I would never let them forget. That night, after the last guest left and the stars began to scatter across the sky, I stood at the kitchen sink rinsing off serving spoons still warm with the scent of Harold's cooking. My hands moved slowly, deliberately. I wasn't rushing. There was no tension in my shoulders, no tightness behind my eyes. Just the quiet after a day that reminded me what being seen truly felt like. The string lights still twinkled outside through the kitchen window, casting little reflections against the glass like echoes of the laughter that had filled the yard only hours before. I smiled without forcing it. For once, it didn't feel like I was carrying everyone else's happiness on my back. I looked around the kitchen, the same space that had felt cold and dismissive just a week earlier. It felt different now. Not because anyone had done anything, but because I had. I dried my hands, walked to the living room, and dropped gently into the couch, camera in hand. I scrolled through the videos I'd captured throughout the day. Faces frozen mid-laugh. Hugs caught in motion. The moment Nia sang and everyone went quiet. A short clip of Corey's baby giggling when someone blew bubbles. All of it felt sacred. Not because it was loud or perfect, but because it was honest. And then the thought hit me, they missed all of this. Not just the food. Not just the music. They missed me. The real me. The one who laughed freely. The one who wasn't adjusting himself to fit into a shrinking box of convenience. They had missed the version of me that came alive when I was finally surrounded by people who gave, not out of duty, but out of love. It wasn't anger that settled into my chest. It was clarity. They chose not to ask how my birthday went. They didn't peek into the backyard once, even with music floating through the air. Not even curiosity brought them out. And in that silence, I realized something deeper than disappointment. I realized I wasn't invisible. I was ignored. That was a different kind of ache. I checked my phone, still no texts. No missed calls. Just a photo Mira had posted earlier that day. It was from the fishing trip the weekend before. A group picture, all smiles. And in the caption, just 5 words. Best weekend ever. #family. It wasn't the words that hit hardest. It was the casualness. The unbothered confidence of someone who didn't think twice about what they left behind. I clicked through to Zara's page. She'd posted nothing. Nothing about me. Nothing about the day. Just a story from that morning showing her matcha latte with a lazy Sunday sticker slapped across the screen. And that's when I knew. There wasn't going to be a conversation. Not from them. They'd forgotten my birthday. Not because they were too busy, but because I had become so habitual in their lives that they assumed I'd just take it. That I'd absorb the hurt and smile like I always did. I had trained them to treat me this way. And I was done. So I got to work. The footage wasn't just for memory anymore. It was for message. I opened my laptop and began sorting through the clips. I edited out the parts where people were adjusting the camera or fixing their hair. I focused on the moments that mattered. I found the second Nia's voice cracked slightly during the Sam Cooke song and zoomed in on my closed eyes. I clipped Corey's toast and matched it with a photo of him and his daughter hugging me. I placed Harold's laugh right after a shot of him cooking on the grill, and the sound of gentle clapping when I blew out a candle someone stuck into a store-bought cupcake. It wasn't a cinematic masterpiece, but it was real. And more than anything, it was mine. I worked on it late into the night, my face dimly lit by the screen as I added the final text slide. This was the happiest I've felt in years. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. You weren't there. Not because you couldn't be, but because you chose not to be. I hope your weekend was worth what you missed. After I rendered the video, I selected stills from it. Harold serving a plate, Nia laughing under the tree, Corey's baby holding my finger, and I printed them. I placed them carefully into a photo album. Each image, a small truth. Each smile, a quiet reminder. I left the last page blank except for a handwritten message. Sometimes people need to see what love looks like when it isn't forced. This is what you missed. Not a party. Not food. Me. I packaged the USB with the photo album, wrapped it neatly in matte black paper, and tied it with a simple gold ribbon. There was no anger in the way I folded the corners. No bitterness in the way I tied the bow. Only purpose. I placed the package on the kitchen counter, the same counter Mira had once filled with surprise cakes for Zara, handmade cards for her mother, wine glasses for dinner guests. This time, it held something she couldn't ignore. I stood there for a moment after setting it down. This wasn't about payback. This was about clarity. Proof. A mirror held up to a house that had stopped reflecting me long ago. I turned off the lights, went to bed, and slept better than I had in months. No dreams. No tossing. Just peace. The next morning, I woke early again. Made coffee. Watched the sun stretch across the living room rug. Mira came downstairs first, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she moved toward the fridge. She paused when she saw the package. She didn't say anything. She just looked at it. She read the label, her name and Zara's, handwritten in black ink. She held it for a long time, then set it down again. Didn't open it. Didn't ask. Later that morning, Zara came down and saw it too. Her brows furrowed. She picked it up, looked at me, and asked, "What's this?" "You'll see," I said, calmly. She set it next to her cereal bowl. And that was it. They didn't open it that day, but I knew they would. Because curiosity has a way of creeping into silence, especially the kind born out of guilt. That night, as I sat out back again, watching the lights blink across the fence, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt free. I had stopped waiting for their permission to feel seen, and they were about to see what that looked like. The package sat on the counter for 2 days. Untouched, unopened, untalked about. Each morning, I'd pass it on my way to the kettle. Gold ribbon still perfectly tied, matte black paper without a wrinkle. Like a question left hanging in the air, waiting for someone to care enough to answer it. Mira walked past it every time she made her coffee, as if it wasn't there. Zara looked at it once, twice, even paused once like she might unwrap it, but then didn't. It was the kind of silence that screams. But I stayed still, said nothing. I wasn't going to push. That was the point. They needed to want to know. They needed to choose curiosity, choose to face what they missed. By Wednesday evening, I started editing again, not out of spite, but because something in me wanted to preserve more of that day. I added captions, titled the video, "What You Missed." I wasn't planning to post it anywhere. This wasn't for the world. It was personal. A time capsule of something they'd thrown away like an old grocery list. At one point, I looked at the photo album again, flipping through the pages slowly. Each image whispered something, not just what I'd felt, but what they failed to feel. Zara's first birthday? I stayed up until 3 a.m. making decorations by hand because the party planner canceled last minute. Myra's promotion dinner? I spent half my paycheck on a private chef and rented linens. I've celebrated every milestone with my full heart. But mine? Apparently, mine was just optional. And so, that package became more than just a memory. It was a message wrapped in gold ribbon. On Thursday evening, I came home from the gym and saw the package was gone. It had finally moved. I didn't ask where it was. Didn't search. If they were ready, they were ready. If not, it wasn't my job to help them open their eyes. But something was different in the air. I could feel it the moment I stepped through the door. Zara was in the living room, quiet, curled up on the couch with a blanket she usually kept folded in her room. No phone in hand, no music playing in her earbuds. Just stillness. Mira was in the kitchen, rinsing out a wine glass. No hum under her breath like usual. Her movements slower, more careful. She didn't say anything when I walked in. Just glanced at me and looked away. I went upstairs. Changed. Took a shower. By the time I came back down, the photo album was sitting on the dining table. Unwrapped. Opened. Face up on the last page. My message written in plain ink on cream paper. You missed more than a birthday. You missed proof of how I am loved, not for what I give, but for who I am. The room smelled faintly of the candle Mira always lit when she needed to relax. But it didn't smell warm. It smelled like guilt. I didn't say anything. Just walked to the fridge, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. Zara was watching me now. Not intensely, not defensively. Just watching. She finally spoke. I didn't think it mattered that much, she said. Her voice was soft, like someone who realized too late that their words had consequences. I sipped my water. It didn't matter to you. That's different. She blinked and looked down. I guess I didn't think. I don't know. You've never made a big deal about your birthday. I nodded, because I didn't want to have to ask to be remembered. The silence that followed was thick. Mira stepped in then, towel in hand. She dried her palms slowly, as if trying to buy time. I can't lie, she said, not looking directly at me. That video, it hurt to watch. I raised an eyebrow. Good. Her head turned then. Not in anger. Just surprise. I didn't make it to hurt you, I added. But I'm glad it did hurt. Because maybe now you understand how it felt to sit here alone. To be so easily dismissed that my own birthday didn't even register as worth staying home for. Mira sat down at the dining table, her hands resting near the photo album but not touching it. I thought the fishing trip was just a tradition, she said. Something harmless. It's not about fish, I said. It's about priority. That truck drove away with my family in it, laughing. On my birthday. And I sat here, wondering how I became the man no one remembered. Zara whispered, I'm sorry, Dad. Her eyes were wet now, blinking fast like she didn't want me to see them shimmer. But I saw, and I believed her. Still, I didn't rush toward forgiveness. That's not how healing works. I'm not angry anymore, I said. But I'm not the same either. Mira looked up. What do you mean? I mean I stopped waiting. Waiting to be noticed. Waiting to be loved out loud. I've been walking on eggshells in this house, trying not to make anyone uncomfortable, while shrinking smaller and smaller. That ends now. Zara looked down again. Mira sighed. Is this the part where you leave us? I laughed. Not bitterly. Just briefly. I'm not leaving. But I'm not begging either. I turned to Zara. You're almost an adult now. Old enough to know that love isn't just something you feel. It's something you show. She nodded slowly. I get it now. Good, I said. Because that day in the backyard? That wasn't just a party. That was a mirror. A reflection of what love looks like when people choose you. I took the photo album and placed it back in its wrapping, careful and quiet. Then I looked at both of them. You two chose to miss that. And I'm not going to forget it overnight. You shouldn't either. They said nothing. They didn't have to. Their faces, especially Zara's, said everything. That night, I went to bed early. No long talks. No dramatic music swelling in the background. Just a quiet understanding in the air. They had finally opened the package. And now they had to live with what was inside. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because they needed to feel the absence I'd felt all year condensed into one unforgettable day. The days that followed were strange, not in an obvious, dramatic way, but in the quiet, awkward shuffle of people trying to undo something that couldn't be undone. Zara wasn't as loud as usual. The music that used to leak from under her door disappeared. She'd pass by me in the hallway and hesitate, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I let her have her silence. Let her sit with it. I had no interest in forcing her to speak. Mira, on the other hand, tried to carry on as if things were normal. She still packed her lunch in the mornings, still kissed me on the cheek before heading to work, but there was hesitation now. Her kiss didn't land the way it used to. It hovered, like she wasn't sure she still had permission. That was the thing no one told you about distance. It didn't always announce itself with doors slamming or voices raised. Sometimes it came in the form of a quiet cup placed gently on a table. A missed question. An avoided gaze. That Wednesday evening, Mira came home with grocery bags. Inside were my favorite things, stuff she hadn't bought in months. The same brand of coffee I always mentioned but never requested. That mango yogurt I used to eat every morning before they started buying low-fat vanilla because it was healthier. Small things, but noticeable. She placed them gently on the counter and lingered a moment. I figured, you might want these, she said softly. I nodded. Thanks. That was it. No apology. No long explanation. Just a gesture. The next night, Zara knocked on my door. Not burst in. Not shouted from the stairs. She knocked. Hey, she said when I opened. Can I come in? I stepped aside and let her. She stood awkwardly near the window, picking at the hem of her hoodie. I read your note again, she began. The one in the album. I waited. I didn't realize you felt that way, she said. Like we didn't see you. I looked at her. Because you didn't. She nodded. I know. And I think I was just used to you being there. Always. For everything. I didn't even think about how it felt from your side. Her voice cracked at the end, like it surprised even her. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. That's what I'd always done. But when I watched the video, she continued, it hit me. Watching other people say things I should have said. Seeing how happy you looked. Like you didn't miss us at all. That's not true, I said. I did miss you. I just didn't wait around for you to show up. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. I stood for a moment, unsure of how much to give. Then I stepped forward and pulled her into a hug. Her shoulders shook as she cried into my shirt. I'm so sorry, she whispered again. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. But I held her. Forgiveness isn't a light switch, it's a slow sunrise. And in that moment, the first rays began to show. The next day, Mira set the table for dinner. She hadn't done that in a while. Usually, we ate on separate schedules, Zara in front of the TV, Mira at her desk, me somewhere between cleaning up and answering work emails. But that evening, she lit a small candle and placed plates in. Halfway through the meal, Mira cleared her throat. I don't know how to fix what we did, she said quietly. I don't even know if it's fixable. But I need you to know, I saw you in that video. Really saw you. And I didn't like what I saw in myself. I met her gaze. Then don't unsee it. She nodded slowly. I won't. We didn't finish our wine. We didn't hold hands across the table. There was no cinematic closure. Just honesty. And honesty was enough. That night, I walked past Zara's room. Her door was open. She was lying on her bed, a notebook in her lap. Good night, Dad, she said before I could speak. Good night, I replied. The next morning, there was a card on my nightstand. Handwritten. Dear Dad. I know this is late. Really late. But I still wanted to say it. Happy birthday. You mean more to me than I ever said out loud. I love you. Zara. I ran my hand over the ink like it might smudge if I held on too long. I folded it neatly and placed it inside the photo album, right next to the last page. Late love is still love. That weekend, I was in the garage fixing an old shelf when Mira came in. She watched me for a while before speaking. Do you want to talk? About us. I paused, set down the drill, and wiped my hands on a rag. I think we've said enough for now, I said. What matters is what happens next. She nodded. I'd like to rebuild. If you're willing. I thought about it. About the years of small slights, quiet disappointments, the growing gap that started as a hairline crack and widened with every unspoken feeling. I'm not interested in rebuilding the same house, I said. But maybe we can build something better. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And she understood that. The days that followed were softer. Not perfect, but softer. She didn't force closeness. Zara didn't try to erase what had happened. Instead, they showed up in the little things. Zara washed the dishes without being asked. Mira left sticky notes on the fridge with little reminders. Don't forget your coffee. You matter. I didn't respond to each gesture, but I noticed them. That was the point, after all. Not every reaction needed words. Some reactions were quiet, but deep, lasting. They had opened the package. Now they were learning to live with what it revealed. And though the wound was still healing, I no longer felt like a man screaming into a void. I was a man being heard. And that made all the difference. Guilt has a strange smell. It doesn't arrive like smoke or sweat. It seeps into a room like warm air after a storm. You can't always see it. You don't hear it coming. But it wraps around you, lingers in the corners, makes the air just a little harder to breathe. That's what the house felt like in the weeks that followed. Mira tried, in her own way, to make things right. Not loudly, not dramatically, but through gestures. A warm meal left out when I got home late, folded laundry I hadn't asked for, lingering looks that tried to speak on her behalf. But I didn't rush toward those offerings. I didn't respond with old habits. Something in me had shifted permanently. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even distant. I was simply no longer chasing a place at the table that should have always been mine. One night, a Thursday, she came home with a cake. No special occasion. Just a plain chocolate cake in a white box. I know it's not your birthday anymore, she said, setting it gently on the counter, but I never got you one. So, her voice trailed off. I looked at it, round, small, neatly iced. No candles. No inscription. Just cake. I appreciate it, I said. She nodded. Would you like a slice? I'm not really in the mood for sweets, I answered. She stood there a moment longer, then carefully closed the box again. She wasn't hurt. Not outwardly. But her eyes gave something away. A flicker of recognition. This is what it feels like to be unseen. Not maliciously. Just softly forgotten. Like dust settling on something you didn't even realize you cared about until it's too late. Zara, too, started acting differently. More present. More cautious. She'd check in with me at odd times. When I was mowing the lawn. When I came home from the store. Even once while I was fixing the garage light. You okay, Dad? She'd ask. Yeah, I'd say. Why? No reason. Just checking. I never told her to stop asking. But I didn't always answer either. Some questions weren't meant to be answered out loud. Sometimes people need to sit with what they did and let the silence do its work. I could see the guilt working its way through both of them, each trying to repay a debt that couldn't be measured in favors or desserts. But I didn't want repayment. I wanted recognition. And not the quick kind. The lasting kind. The kind that changes how someone looks at you, even when you're not speaking. One Saturday morning, Mira sat beside me on the porch. She didn't bring a book. Didn't bring her phone. Just a cup of tea and a quiet presence. I've been thinking, she said after a long stretch of silence. I waited. I used to tell my friends how lucky I was. That I had a husband who didn't complain. A man who didn't ask for much. Who let me be independent. I wore it like a badge. I raised an eyebrow. You mean, I made your life easier? She sighed. Yeah, I did. But I never asked if that was making your life any better. We sat in silence for a few moments. It's easy to praise someone who stays quiet, I said finally. It takes more to ask why they had to. She didn't argue. Didn't flinch. I thought I was being a good wife, she continued. Holding the house together, raising our daughter, working, keeping things steady. But I confused survival with connection. I assumed that if you weren't yelling or leaving, then everything was fine. I looked out across the lawn, the sun beginning to stretch its arms across the grass. You know what hurts more than being yelled at? I asked. What? Being overlooked. It's a quieter kind of pain, but it lingers longer. She nodded. I feel like I looked up one day and realized you weren't standing next to me, I said. You were standing ahead of me, with your priorities, your routines, your celebrations. And I was just somewhere behind, waiting to be remembered. Myra's voice cracked then. Just a little. I remember now. I know, I said. But memory isn't magic. It doesn't undo anything. It just gives you a chance to choose better next time. She placed her cup on the rail. I want to do better. I know, I said again. But I'm not rushing to believe it. And I meant that. Not cruelly. Not in punishment. But because forgiveness, real forgiveness, takes time. And I had rushed so many parts of my life trying to keep everyone comfortable. I wasn't doing that anymore. Later that week, Zara came into the living room holding her laptop. Can I show you something? She asked. I set my book down. Sure. She sat beside me, opened the screen, and pressed play. A slideshow began. Photos of us from over the years. Ones I had forgotten even existed. Me holding her in the hospital. A camping trip from when she was 8. Her science fair when she lost and still smiled. At the end of the video, a black screen with white text appeared. I've always been proud to be your daughter. I just forgot to say it out loud. I'm sorry I made you feel small. You've always been the biggest part of who I am. I turned to her. Her eyes were glassy, her mouth trembling. You didn't have to make this, I said softly. I know, she whispered. But I needed to. We sat together for a while. Not crying. Just breathing. The guilt in the house had settled into something softer now. Less of a fog, more of a blanket. Not weighing us down, but covering what had been exposed. It would take time. Maybe a lot of time. But something had changed. I no longer felt like I had to prove I mattered. They had seen it, felt it, missed it. And now, they were learning how not to miss it again. It didn't happen all at once, the shift in me. There wasn't some lightning bolt or single moment where I suddenly declared, I'm different now. No. It crept in slowly, quietly, like a tide that rises while your back is turned. One day, I simply stopped waiting for the house to feel like home. And I started creating one somewhere else. Not physically. I still lived under the same roof, slept in the same bed, ate at the same kitchen table, but my spirit had moved. It began with small things. I started waking up earlier than I needed to, not out of anxiety, but out of choice. I'd take a walk through the neighborhood before the world fully woke. No phone, no noise, just me and my footsteps on the sidewalk. It was like pressing reset on a life I'd once let drift too far from the shoreline. Then came the gym. I reactivated my membership. Not because I wanted abs or biceps or any of that. I just wanted to feel strong again. To remind myself that my body wasn't just a machine for carrying groceries or assembling furniture. I was more than what I gave others. I was someone worth investing in, even if I was the only one doing the investing. The next thing I did? I reconnected with the local rec center. I used to volunteer there years ago, teaching financial literacy workshops to kids and young adults. Back then, I thought I was just helping out. But the truth was, I was building something. A sense of purpose. A quiet corner of the world where I was seen. And that's where I returned. First, it was once a week. Then twice. Before I knew it, I was back every Saturday morning, whiteboard in hand, explaining budgeting and credit scores to high school seniors who reminded me of myself at that age, curious, nervous, searching. They listened to me. They asked questions. They called me Mr. Jules, even though I told them they didn't have to. One kid, Leon, stayed behind after class one day. You really like this, huh? He asked, stuffing papers into his backpack. Yeah, I said. I do. You talk like it matters. Like we matter. You do, I told him. He looked down, then smiled. Thanks. That smile stuck with me for days. It was the kind of expression I used to wait for from my daughter. The kind that says, I see you. I hear you. You made a difference. Funny thing is, I wasn't chasing that anymore, not from Zara, not from Mira. And maybe that's why the shift was happening so naturally. Because for the first time, I wasn't doing things to be noticed. I was doing them because they made me feel alive. Nia invited me to another open mic night. I almost said no out of habit, but I stopped myself. I put on a clean button-up, sprayed some cologne I hadn't used in years, and showed up. The bar was small, intimate. Exposed brick walls, low lighting, a little stage near the corner. Nia sang with her whole soul, and for the first time in a long time, I clapped not out of obligation, but because I felt something move inside me. When she finished, she walked over and hugged me. You glow different now, she said with a smile. Do I? Yeah. You used to look like you were trying not to disappear. Now you look like someone who knows who he is. That hit harder than I expected. I left that night feeling taller. And then there was Corey. We kept in touch more frequently now. He called just to check in, sometimes asking for advice about home repairs or fatherhood. Other times, he'd say nothing much at all. Just hey, how's your day? One Sunday, I helped him paint his garage. His baby daughter watched from her playpen while we rolled paint and talked about life. You ever think maybe these little things, is what it's all about? He asked, paint smudged across his cheek. I do now, I said. And I meant it. Because while the house I lived in still carried the weight of guilt and quiet apologies, I had found something lighter. Not happiness exactly, but wholeness. A sense that I didn't have to keep asking, do I matter? Because I knew now that I did. Not because of a birthday. Not because of who remembered me or who forgot. But because I had decided I did. Mira noticed, of course. One evening, as I came in from a late workshop, she watched me hang up my jacket and said, "You're different." I turned slowly. How so? You don't walk like you're waiting for someone to ask you how you're doing. I smiled. That's because I'm not. She nodded, chewing her bottom lip. You seem lighter. I am. She walked over and touched my arm. I'm glad, she whispered. But I didn't reach for her hand like I might have before. I let the moment stay where it was. A shared acknowledgement. No more. No less. Zara, too, started following the shift. She began volunteering at the same rec center after school. Said it was for extra credit, but I saw the way her eyes lit up when a kid asked for help on their homework. I saw how she smiled when I told her she did a good job. Real smiles. Not forced. We didn't talk about the birthday much anymore. But we didn't need to. It hung in the air like a landmark, something we passed on our way to something new. A reminder, not a weight. One afternoon, she brought home a plant. A small jade plant in a black ceramic pot. This is for your office, she said. It's supposed to bring luck and peace. I looked at it for a long time before saying, thank you. She shrugged. I figured, your new life deserves something green. That night, I placed the plant beside my laptop, beside the framed photo of me and Corey's baby girl at the backyard party. I looked at them both and thought, maybe this is the beginning of something I build from scratch. Not a new family, not a new house, but a new version of myself. And if they wanted to walk beside me as I built it, good. But I wasn't waiting anymore. The shift in me wasn't about rebellion. It was about rebirth. There's a kind of silence that arrives not from absence, but from reflection. The kind that fills a room after truth has been spoken and heard. That was the silence in our home now. Not tense, not strained. Just still. The package, the video, the birthday, that day had become a shadow, something always just around the corner of every conversation. No one brought it up directly anymore. But it hung in the air when Mira paused before speaking, when Zara knocked before entering my study, when the kitchen felt just a little more deliberate with every interaction. They had watched it. They had felt it. And now, they were living with it. I never asked them what they thought of the video. I didn't need to. I saw it written all over their faces. Myra's eyes were softer now, like they were always searching for ways to repair something without undoing the truth. Zara lingered longer in rooms we shared, sometimes starting conversations about anything but clearly wanting everything. I could feel the shift in them. But more importantly, I could feel the shift in me. I no longer lived waiting for them to catch up to my emotions. I no longer hoped they'd say the right thing to fill the cracks. I'd already built something sturdier, within myself, within the spaces I moved in, within the people I now surrounded myself with. And that's when I realized, the greatest revenge wasn't anger. It wasn't a dramatic exit or a cold shoulder or bitter silence. The greatest revenge was showing them the joy they missed. That morning, I printed one last photo. It was one I had taken without realizing it during the party, a timer shot that captured me mid-laugh, holding a plate of Harold's food, standing in the middle of the yard with people in the background smiling, talking, clapping. I looked alive and undeniably happy. I slipped it into a simple black frame and placed it on the mantel in the living room, right between a photo of Zara's 6th grade graduation and one from our last family vacation 5 years ago. I didn't say a word about it. But later that evening, I noticed Mira standing in front of the fireplace, staring at it. Her voice was quiet when she said, "You looked so free that day." I answered from behind her. She turned to face me. "I should have been there." I nodded. "You should have." She didn't defend herself, didn't try to rewrite history. She just looked at the photo again and said, "That's the version of you I miss. The one I didn't realize was disappearing." "I never disappeared," I replied. "You just stopped looking." We didn't argue. We didn't cry. Some truths don't need dramatics. They just need to land. The next day, Zara handed me a flash drive. I edited something, she said. You can watch it whenever. That evening, I opened the file. It was a short montage, a quiet video of clips and photos, some pulled from old family tapes, some recent. She had titled it, Dad, We Remember Now. There were scenes of me teaching her to ride a bike, laughing with her in the backyard as a toddler, tying her shoes, walking with her hand in mine at the school gates. Moments I didn't even remember were being captured. The music underneath was soft piano and strings. No lyrics, just memory. At the end of the video, her voice came in. I'm sorry we forgot you. I'm sorry we let someone else show you what we should have. But I see you now, and I love who you are. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. I just closed the laptop and sat with it. Not out of sadness, but peace. She had finally understood. Mira never saw the video unless Zara showed her. I didn't ask, but the next week, Mira did something I didn't expect. She hosted a dinner. Nothing fancy, just close friends. A few old neighbors. Corey and his family. Harold. Even Nia. She set the table. Made the food herself. No caterers. No shortcuts. At the center of the table was a small chalkboard sign. It read, Today is a good day. I walked in, stunned, and Mira smiled softly. I wanted to see your people. I wanted to see the joy I missed, she said. That night, she watched. Really watched. As Harold made people laugh with wild stories. As Corey toasted to second chances. As Nia played under the stars again. Zara stood beside her most of the evening, quiet but present. They both saw it now, not just what they had missed, but what had never required them to show up in the first place. I didn't speak about the birthday. Didn't mention the fishing trip. I didn't have to. They now lived with that memory the way I once did, with weight. And that weight was their own to carry. After the guests left, I stood outside under the string lights again. Same place I had been weeks ago. But this time, I wasn't alone. Zara came up beside me. Do you think we'll ever make it up to you? She asked. I looked at her, my grown daughter who had once held my hand on Halloween and asked if monsters were real. You don't need to make it up, I said. You just need to remember. She nodded. I will. And then Mira stepped out too, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. She stood on the other side of me, hands folded. We lost something, she whispered. But maybe we found something else. I didn't say anything, but I didn't move away. They needed that memory more than I did now. They needed to remember the empty seat at the table, the quiet birthday, the laugh they didn't hear, the love they didn't see. They needed to remember the day I stopped waiting and the version of me that blossomed because of it. And they would. Every time they looked at that framed photo. Every time they heard Nia's music again. Every time I smiled, and it wasn't for them. That would be the memory they'd never shake. And that, more than anything, was the gift.